digital synthesizer. And this video is just meant to give a general overview of what Pluto is, how it works. There's probably going to be some stuff I need to dig deeper into in future videos or in an actual manual, but this is just going to give you a general idea of what this thing is. So let's start at the top here. This top row, these 5 outputs are the main modulation sources for Pluto. Anything with this black circle, this filled circle, those are all outputs on the device. Anything with this outlined or white circle, those are the inputs. This top row, main modulation sources, 5 pulse outputs, control over the master clock or tempo. The spread knob controls the relationship of the timing of these outputs. Width controls the pulse width of all 5 of these outputs. Then we've got a sequencer and voice combo. It is a 4-step sequencer. You can send a signal into the step input to step through the sequence, or if you don't have anything plugged in, you can play those notes with these little keypads. There's a voice here with toggle switch to select a voice mode. There's one knob for changing the timbre, blending between waveforms or wavetables depending on the voice mode. There's a modulation input that does that blending for you, and depending on the voice mode and where this knob is, it will also modulate other things like frequency. And then the level input is, it's like a low-pass gate style VCA, so it controls the amplitude of the voice. There's a second sequencer and voice combo, 4-step sequence. You can step through the sequence by sending a signal into the step input. If you send a signal into the direction input, you can change the direction of the sequence. Voice has a toggle switch, again, for selecting the voice mode. One knob for blending between waveforms, wavetables, changing the timbre, modulation input, and again, it has an LPG style VCA input labeled level. There's a 2-knob delay section over here. Both voices get sent through the delay. You can control the delay time. There's an LED that indicates the delay time. And then there's this knob called intensity. Intensity controls 2 things. It's the level of the delay that you hear, and it's the feedback. So it's kind of like to the left, there's no delay. You turn it to the right to get more and more delay level, more feedback. And then if you turn it all the way to the right, there's this little infinity icon. It will loop the delay. So whatever's in the delay buffer, it just will loop that over and over. Okay, let's go back up to this top row. So we've got our master clock, and it actually goes from a faster rate starting on the left to slower rate to the right. It can get up into audio rates if you've got it all the way to the left. And then if you turn it all the way to the right, there's this little clock icon. It will sync to an external source. So that can be a MIDI clock or a sync input. And I'll show you all the inputs and outputs in the back in a minute here. And then we've got this spread knob. So this controls this timing of the relationship of these 5 outputs. So these 5 outputs, they have these funny names. These are actually the names of the moons of Pluto. There's 5 moons, 5 outputs. And as you turn the spread knob, it does 2 different things. If you turn it from noon to the right, changes the time divisions of these outputs. If you turn it from noon to the left, it randomizes the signals from those outputs. So first let's talk about the divisions. As you turn it to the right, you get greater and greater divisions out of these outputs. It sort of spreads out the timing of these outputs. Probably a good time to turn it on to show you how that works. So here, you can see that the pulse width is different in these right now, but we'll talk about that in a second. But as you turn the spread knob, you'll see these divisions, the time divisions of these signals start to increase. So right now they're all in sync, they're all blinking at the same time. And as I turn it to the right, you can see that this one actually doesn't change. It's always in sync with the master clock. But you can see that the outputs to the right are going at a slower rate, or a greater time division of the master clock. And if you turn it all the way, you see this one's going rather quickly, and these signals are moving slowly. So you can get a wide variety of timings out of that time division control from the spread knob. And if you turn this to the left, you get some randomized patterns. And they're not completely random, because I haven't found that to be super useful, but these are randomized Euclidean rhythms. And maybe you've seen that in some other modules, some other devices. And the way this works is, as you turn it to the left, it will start to randomize these outputs, give it a sort of random Euclidean pattern. And as you turn it farther to the left, it evolves those patterns more quickly. Maybe we can see that a little bit better if I speed up the master clock. And so if you have it closer to noon, it'll randomize those patterns more slowly. And if you've got it further to the left, it'll randomize those patterns more quickly. It'll evolve those patterns more quickly. And if you like something that you hear, if you like the rhythms that you're getting out of these, you can put it back to noon and it will lock those in. And then you can move it to the left to evolve those patterns. And then we've got pulse width control over here with this width knob. Let me slow this down a little bit. And this goes in two directions, just like spread knob. So at noon, there's a very short pulse width for all the outputs. And as I turn from noon to the left, it starts to increase the pulse width from the right to the left. So this width will get wider before the outputs on the left get wider. And so you can see that this is a pretty wide pulse width, still a very narrow pulse width on the left. And as I turn it, they all start to get wider, and then all the way to the left, you can see it's a very wide pulse width. And if I go the other direction, it works the opposite way. So starting on the left, wide pulse width to a narrow pulse width, turn it all the way to the right, and you've got wide pulse width from all these outputs. So between these three knobs, master clock, spread, which adjusts the timing relationship between all these outputs and gives you randomized rhythms, and then the width control, which lets you adjust the pulse width from right to left, left to right. You get a lot of different variations from a pretty small space. And then there's one more thing here. This is the shuffle input. And if you send a high signal into here, it will shuffle the signals. So the signal from this first output will move to the second output, and so on. And then the signal from this last output will start coming out of the first output. And so you can use that to kind of inject some chaos or some kind of syncopation and get some polyrhythms, depending on how you use that shuffle input. Okay, let's quickly look at the back panel. Volume, the thumb wheel for controlling the volume, audio output, audio input, CV out. This is 2 channels of CV out, MIDI, and you can select this to be a MIDI input or output. It's a TRS jack. The sync jack, you can select this to be a sync input or output. Power switch, battery indicator, USB micro B jack, which is how you charge Pluto. It's also for data, so for firmware updates, and USB MIDI as well. So let's take a look at this first sequencer in voice. So because nothing's plugged into this step input, I can just play these little keypads. But if I want to step through that sequence, I can just plug that in. I can change the scale, change it. It's a sine wave over here on the left. Do a triangle, do a saw. And then there's two more outputs. There's two outputs here on the sequencer. This step invert, which just inverts the signal that comes in to the step input. Threshold sends out a high signal whenever the step, the current active step, is above noon. And this touch output, that sends out a high signal whenever you touch a keypad. So I can use that to step through this second voice. And let's see, one more thing about this step input is that this level input is normal to the step input. So if a signal comes in here, that opens up the VCA so you can actually hear the voice. But you can control these independently if you put a cable into the level input. So if I put a cable in there, you're not going to hear anything because there's no high signal coming in there. But I can do that. And then if I change the divisions, let's speed this up. So now you're going to only hear that voice when this output goes high. And when you're stepping through a sequence here, this no longer functions like a little keyboard, but you can select a stage, and when the sequencer gets to that stage, it reverses direction. So you can create, more complex patterns with just 4 steps, with things like selecting these stages and sending it in reverse. So this top voice here, that's what I call like traditional waveforms: sine wave, triangle, saw. Second option here is a wavetable oscillator. So let's try just modulating that wavetable voice. Let's get this second voice in here. So whenever we hit this stage, this threshold output goes high, and we're going to step through the second sequence. Okay, I think I'll just stop talking and patch for a bit, and you can hear how it sounds.